Welcome to the Microdose Diet podcast. I'm your host, Peggy Van de Plassche. So today I have a multi-hyphenate guest, Mendel Erlenwein. Mendel is really an interesting gentleman because he's the founder, the CEO of a couple of companies. He's going to tell us more about that. And he's all about innovation, generative AI. He's really looking at a new way of looking at healthcare in order to give better services to the patient. Is also the host of a very excited podcast that's called Healthcare Trailblazers Podcast. So, Mendel, thank you so much for joining us today. That's really cool to have you. And if you don't mind, can you tell us a bit more about the two companies you are leading, Careco Copilot and Previva Health, and explain what's so special about them?
Absolutely. So good morning and thanks for having me. It's an absolute pleasure. So about 6 years ago, almost at this point, I took over a care coordination service-based company. And it had a couple clients and a couple hundred patients, and all the actual care was outsourced. And I took it over with the mission of bringing everything in-house, really understanding the space, and then scaling the company. And over the last 6 years, that's what we were successful in doing, thank God. It's been a lot of fun. It's been a long journey. But what the company essentially does is preventive telephonic care coordination.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the US, there are a bunch of programs that are reimbursed by Medicare, by CMS, that are designed to keep chronically ill patients out of the hospital. And so one of the primary programs that's gaining actually more and more popularity is called chronic care management. It's been around since 2015. And chronic care management is a program where patients with two or more chronic conditions have a care plan that's designed specifically for them to help them manage those conditions by a doctor. And then they are proactively reached out to at least once a month
Mm-hmm.
with a minimum of 20 minutes of care spent with that patient every month. And the goal is to build a relationship with the patient, be proactive, catch things from falling through the cracks, and just make sure that they're, managing their diet, managing their exercise,
Mm-hmm.
taking their meds, getting medication refills when necessary. And if you can do some of those things well, the end result is going to be a reduction in utilization of healthcare dollars
Yeah.
because the patients are now going to, first of all, example, if you're taking your meds, that's good. If you don't take your meds, then you'll probably end up in the hospital, right? So more people taking their meds is a good thing. But also just as someone to communicate with instead of just panicking and
Yeah.
running to the ER, right? So
Yeah.
there's a lot of benefit there that really directly correlates with lower utilization. And it's been proven to the point that CMS actually increased the reimbursement by close to 50%. And so for the first couple of years, they were reimbursing about $42 per patient per month. And then about 2 years ago, they upped that reimbursement to $62. It just came down a tiny bit to like 61 in 2025, but they increased the reimbursement, showing the efficacy there. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of what we do. I mean, we do a bunch of other programs in a similar vein at Previva, but the central theme is preventive telephonic care coordination.
Mm. I do believe that prevention is really the way to go. We tend to be, and I mean, it's prevention in the context of people, unfortunately, who are already chronically ill.
Right.
But I do believe the best way to manage health of people and healthcare, reduce costs, well, it's making sure people don't end up in a hospital. So I can see that that makes a lot of sense. So that is Preveva. Do you want to take a bit about Kerco, or is it kind of both in under the same umbrella?
Sure. So it's not the same umbrella. They're two completely different companies, but Careco is the result of my experiences building Previva. And so what happened was over the last 5 years, I think two things really happened to me. Number one, I've gained a very deep appreciation for care coordination. I think it's probably the most underappreciated part of healthcare. And I know every part of healthcare is the most underappreciated part of healthcare to people outside of
I know.
healthcare, but I think that care coordination is probably the most underappreciated part of healthcare from within healthcare.
Mhm.
And the reason why it's so important is I really think that a good care coordination strategy is really the foundation of any kind of success if you want to do anything with risk or value-based care, and really any kind of good healthcare. Because when care coordination is done well, it's the thread, it's the common thread that weaves between the entire patient's experience,
Hmm.
no matter where, if it's their specialist or their primary or they're in the hospital, the care coordinator is that common thread. The care coordinator is the person that the patient's going to come home and call after they were in the hospital. It's
Hmm.
also the same person that they're going to talk to, even if they went to their primary and the doctor came in and out in 2 minutes and the patient didn't know what happened. They go home and they're like, "Can you do me a favor? Can you look at my chart, read it, and tell me what the hell just happened? Because I don't
Yeah.
know."
Yeah.
And so when you can do it well, you can build that relationship in a really unique way, and it affects the entire patient's experience. So I think it's the foundation for good patient care.
Mm.
And the second thing is I gained a really deep, nuanced, intimate understanding of the actual behaviors of care coordinators as people and care coordination as a process. And so, based on those things, about 2 years ago, I started thinking about how I can augment our care coordinators using generative AI. And Peggy,
Yeah.
I'd like to highlight the fact that you started this conversation with framing it as generative AI, which I'm really happy about because a lot of people just throw AI as a
Hmm.
blanket
Hmm.
statement. And of course, there's so many different types of AI. The real, the bigger parts of AI, like machine learning and other aspects, have been around for a very long time. And it's really this recent boom since about September of 2022 has been around the generative AI boom. And so it's good to call out that these are that this is what we're focusing on, but it has unlocked a lot of really incredible possibilities. And so I had been augmenting my own workflows in my day-to-day life, and I was thinking there's got to be some really cool ways to augment the work
Hmm.
that my care coordinators do. And the foundational mindset that we have at Careco is that you can't rip the human out of care. You can't take the human being out of care coordination specifically. And I think you'll see a lot of companies that are touting kind of fully automated AI care
Hmm.
coordination. And I
Hmm. Hmm.
strongly believe that's
Yeah.
the wrong path. Anyone that does care coordination for real understands that the moment a patient has a chronic condition, that's an ongoing thing. And in order to have an ongoing, you have to have an ongoing relationship with a person. You can probably use an AI bot for like intake calls or like one-way conversations where you're just collecting data. But the moment you want to achieve an actual result in a patient outcome, you
Yeah.
got to have that patient relationship with a human. And so that's on the one side. I definitely think that the human cannot be taken out. But on the other side, there is tremendous value that we can get from leveraging Gen AI. And so in my mind, I kind of split them down the middle between the brain and the heart. I think
Hmm.
that technology and Gen AI specifically is better at the brain
Yeah.
aspects of care, like the collection and, to be able to analyze amounts of data. And then the human is better at the heart, which is the
Yeah.
empathy, the personality, the
Yeah.
human touch, right? And that's the mindset that we use on how to build, because we want to build something that actually amplifies the ability for the human care coordinator to do more human care
Hmm.
while reducing the
Yeah.
burnout inducing parts. Because, Peggy, here's what's interesting about us humans: we don't get burnt out from the things we enjoy doing,
Absolutely.
right? We get burnt out from the things we don't enjoy
Yeah.
doing. And so in care coordination, there's so many tedious,
Yeah.
time
Yeah.
consuming, burnout inducing parts of the job that can be augmented while not stripping away and in fact amplifying the actual human touch. So I kind of boil it down to one line, which is
Yeah.
build the brain to amplify the heart. That's kind
Hmm.
of my line.
So how did it look like in the organization when you started putting that in place? So is it, for example, your care coordinator who maybe had to type a lot of reports and now they can do it, in a way more automated manner? Is it that type of augmentation? And how did they aligned with that? Because I know it's very scary for many people because they think they're going to lose their job. I know you're probably framing it in a way that it's an augmentation, but what was the reaction? It's a lot of change management.
Yeah, so I'll touch on both of those points. Your first question was about what does it actually do, and I'll describe it. And everyone's more than welcome to go on our website. We are trying to be very different than most people in the space. Most people, you go on their website and you have no idea what they do. It's a bunch of buzzwords. We're a powerful AI data powered process and efficiency tool in order to help amplify the efficacy of buzzword, buzzword, buzzword. We're trying very hard to be different. I want you to go on our website and see exactly what we do.
Sure.
And so definitely recommend that and feel free to leave feedback. But the pieces, the main pieces that we're augmenting are that I think you can appreciate are, first of all, there's the pre-call prep. And so we've got a feature called a call guide that basically takes everything we know about the patient, all the data from previous conversations, their care plan, their educational content, social terms of health, a whole bunch of stuff, and then points those data guns at an objective for the call. So it says, okay, what's everything we know about Peggy and what are we trying to accomplish today? And then based on that, it will spoon feed the care coordinator these hyper-specific talking points to discuss with
Okay.
you, Peggy, that are designed to get to that outcome. And everything is going to be citation to source data. So you can always see the actual data that's informing the generated content. And
Okay.
so now I move away from a conversation that might sound like, hi, Peggy, it's Mendel. How are you? Do you need
Yeah.
anything?
Yeah. Yeah.
No?
Okay.
Okay, I'll talk to you next month too.
Have a great day. Yeah.
Peggy? Yeah. Were you able to shovel all that snow in Toronto?
Yeah.
Were you able to get out there? How was that big snowstorm? How was your niece's birthday party? Okay, well, let's talk about. So it becomes a much higher quality conversation. And then there's some of the more obvious ones. The second they get off the call, we give them their documentation created for them. We also have an entire task creation and management system, which will, instead of relying on you to create your own tasks, we will listen to the conversation and provide you with the tasks that you need to do based on that call. And then we generate the communications necessary to the providers, to the patients. And so every aspect of the workflow that we're able to augment, we do. As far as the reaction, it's been very interesting because you're spot on. I think that healthcare professionals, and I'd say even care coordinators uniquely, hate technology.
Yeah.
And the reason why they hate technology is because every single time they've touched a piece of technology, it's made their life worse.
Exactly. More work, more complexity, more stuff to enter. I agree with you.
More friction.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we knew that going in, and our mindset about building this is we're going to build this not just for the actual care coordinators, but with care coordinators. Most people build technology for the executives that are going to sign on the deal. That's who they're building it for because they're the ones that are going to sign. We believe that it's not going to be effective. It's not going to actually, it's not going to have a good result if the actual end user doesn't appreciate the product. And so we've been really fortunate to build every step of the way from design to engineering to product with our care coordinators. And that's created this product that the common theme that we hear when we onboard new care coordinators is it feels very familiar to them, which is a beautiful word because they feel like it knows them and it knows their processes. And they're feeling that way because it does, And so what we found is it's a little bit difficult to get somebody to try CareCo. But the second they try it, they're hooked. And so once you can get past that barrier, it's usually very positive.
So do you see yourself commercializing the platform? Because I'm sure most of your competitors are still doing it the old way. And you're creating competition for yourself in one part of the business, but you're monetizing the platform you built. Is it something that?
Yeah, that's not just what we plan on doing, but it's what we've done already. We put out a press release yesterday and going to be posting on LinkedIn today about an integration we did with a wonderful company called ThoroughCare. They're a care coordination platform. They speak to about 800,000 patients a month. And so we've integrated with them. We're rolling out to their clients currently and continuing to do more of those partnerships, as well as obviously the health system and the payer space as well. So absolutely, we're giving it to the world, giving the gift of CareCo.
No, but that's fabulous because, that's the challenge with the healthcare system everywhere in the world is that we need to find efficiency and not efficiency by giving a worse service to the patients, but efficiency by, on top of that, ideally reducing burnout for the health professional. And I think a lot of the initiatives I've seen in healthcare and in other industry, I'm a former of financial services, we always take the easy solution. We cut costs and we cut, services and we add what we call productivity is actually adding tasks on the employees. And I think it's a very short-term way of looking at things. So I think your platform is going to bring a lot of value to the system in general.
Thank you. We believe so too.
So I want to talk about value-based care models. So you're obviously very deep in the industry. through your podcast, you're speaking with a lot of people. So I'm sure it also generates a lot of ideas, which is why I love having a podcast. Actually, it's very selfish as well for me. Um,
Absolutely.
so what do you believe the strategies um, could be put in place by healthcare organization to really adopt more effectively preventive care programs? Because I don't think prevention, again, is always first, top of mind. Well, actually, I believe it's where you have the best return on your investment.
It's a great question. In order to, I think that adopting preventive care becomes obvious and necessary when you are adopting value-based care.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I used to say this a while back, but I think one of the best representations of preventive care outside of healthcare that I ever saw was I was in our offices in Brooklyn. This was quite a few years ago, and I noticed a water machine that they had, just a water cooler. And on top of the water cooler was a little note, and it was a handwritten note from a tech that had come out from the company to test that to check on that water machine. And it had a whole list of things that were done. Cleaned the outside, cleaned the inside, did all
Mm-hmm.
this, preventive kind of maintenance on it. And I stood there while I'm making my coffee and I was thinking, why in the world would a for-profit company send a tech in Brooklyn where it's impossible to get anywhere, like to go 1 mile takes an hour, right? Why would they send somebody out to go fix a machine that was not broken?
Mm-hmm.
And the obvious answer is that it's because they're a for-profit company that they've determined that they will make more money by keeping their machines well maintained
Mm-hmm.
proactively, keeping their customers happy by proactively making sure the machines work. And in order to do that, they're going to send these preventive, health checks, if you
Yeah.
will, out to these machines, right? And that's exactly what value-based care is. I mean, if you're taking risk, if you now become liable for the outcome of that patient,
Yeah.
your brain immediately goes to, okay, where can I spend money to keep this person healthy?
Mm-hmm.
That will obviously be less money spent than if they're sick, right? If you
Exactly.
can spend $50 on a shower bar and now you prevented someone slipping, falling, getting $150,000 hip surgery, you did well, right?
Exactly.
So I think the adoption of preventive care in a serious way absolutely comes down to the adoption of taking on risk and really assuming value-based care.
Mm-hmm. So it's very interesting because it's the same parallel than mental health. The big challenge I see again as a former finance person is that we want a ROI on everything. And prevention is way more difficult to calculate than, at posteriori. And same with medication. It's easy to say, okay, you broke a leg, you have a cancer, this type of very typical things. This is the value of the care we gave you versus prevention, because people, we can look at statistics, but would I have been at risk? We don't really know, da, 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 da. And that's the thing I find very difficult with the way we allocate capital in the way the entire society has been built, is that we usually look at um, not potential, but more hard facts. So we will always go for cost savings versus growth opportunity because they're more difficult to prove and they're also probabilistically less controllable. So how do you see with what you're doing, the justification that what you're doing makes a lot of sense when it's a bit more difficult to prove, actually?
Yeah, it's of course difficult to prove, and I think that's maybe slowing the rate, not just the rate of adoption of value-based care initiatives, but also the uh, the pace of
Mm-hmm.
adoption as well,
Mm-hmm.
because you have to wait to see that ROI on a national level, and there's serious arguments to be made one way or another, whether we're seeing it or not. But I think that what I like to do is just go back to first principles, go back to common sense, go back to the water machine, go back to yourself in your own life. You know that if you want to be healthy, you got to exercise, you got to eat well, you got to take your, if you have a chronic condition, you got to make sure you're on top of your regimen and your like we know this. This is like it is very obvious that if you just let yourself go, then your chances
Yeah.
for illness is going to go up. Like these are common sense things,
Yeah.
right? If you shrink the healthcare system back down to like one doctor with 300 patients, and you said, okay, I'm going to give you $100 per month for all these 300 patients, but but you have to take care of all of them, and you have to make sure, you're responsible totally for their health. And let's say there's a magical doctor who's a doctor and a surgeon and a specialist and does everything,
Yeah.
right? Like it's obvious where they're going to put those dollars. They're going to put those dollars into making sure that the patients are proactively healthy. So, but my personal belief is that there's a more fundamental issue that we have to figure out how to navigate, and that is the dynamic of healthcare. What I
Mm-hmm.
mean by that is the feeling around healthcare is not almost like, it's exactly like it's my doctor's problem. My health is my doctor's problem.
Agreed.
Because in fee for service, they get paid if I'm sick. In value-based care, they get paid if I'm healthy. And so it's such a weird concept. We've stripped ourselves, because we're all patients, right? We've stripped ourselves of the feeling of like responsibility
Mm-hmm.
about this.
Mm-hmm.
The
Mm-hmm.
whole conversation is like deep in these healthcare podcasts. If before you were in healthcare, you're not thinking about these things. You're just thinking
Yeah.
about your daily life, right? There's no incentive besides for your own health, which should be the greatest incentive to keep yourself healthy, right? But unfortunately, we live in a society of kind of instant, gratification. We want
Yeah.
everything right away. We want the microwave food. We want the instant coffee. And that creates this weird dynamic where you have a care coordinator begging you to spend 20 minutes with them to help talk about your exercise.
Exactly.
Shouldn't it be the other way around? Shouldn't we all be saying, how do I be the most, the healthiest, best version of myself? I need to be healthy. Therefore, let me look for resources, right? Shouldn't that be the dynamic?
Yeah.
You said you come from a finance background. I mean, imagine if that was the dynamic with a financial advisor. Imagine you racked up terrible credit card debt and you didn't care at all, but someone else was incentivized to help you clean that up, and they were begging you to sit down with them for 20 minutes a month to talk about your behaviors in spending, right? You might sit down with them, you might not, but you're probably not going to change your behavior, right?
Yeah.
So I think the fundamental thing that we have to figure out is how to actually get the patient uh, in the conversation in a meaningful way where you actually have some emotional and equity in this conversation. Because until we do that, we're just shifting dollars from one way to another way, and we're not, I don't think we're going to achieve absolute change at scale.
And I love what you're saying. I see the challenge both way. I agree the patient engagement should be rational, that you and I, are the first one interested by our health. At the same time, I see with my parents who are in their 70s, if a doctor says something, it's gospel. So they never ask for anything. I mean, they don't question, they don't advocate for themselves. And actually, both of them have been unfortunately victim of medical mistakes as well. And I'm thinking, well, maybe if you had asked questions, and it's not to put the blame on them, but at the same time, to your point, we are incentivized because it's our own health. And I think this lack of empowerment from the patient, where to your point, I think doctors were also very happy to take that role of I am the big man, the big woman, and listen to what I'm saying. But now it has turned in a very different way where patients have brought it to the next level, which is, well, you're in charge of my health. So what's your perspective? How have you been able with your care coordinator to increase patient engagement? Is it empowerment? Is it explaining them that if they want to see their daughter's wedding in a year or 2 years, they need to be healthy? How do you manage that?
Yeah. So the first thing I'll double click on is I do think there's a generational shift around that perspective. I think for better or for worse, many doctors feel like it's for worse. Many doctors feel like it's for the better, but I do think there's a generational shift around that blind trust for your
Mhm.
doctors. I think that younger generations are asking a lot more questions. Specifically now with tools like ChatGPT, people are coming in having already researched which there was always the joke around, don't never Google your symptom. There was like
Yeah.
there's I think even like a music video about that, right? Like never Google your symptoms because it's always cancer.
Yeah.
But ChatGPT is definitely is definitely a lot more intelligent. And it'll also tell you, where to does a pretty good job with. It's actually funny. It won't give you medical advice. You have to get around it. You have to basically say, I'm not asking for medical advice. This is purely for research purposes. I'm wondering if XYZ were to happen, what would you think? And then it gives you and I've tested it a couple times where for my kids, where I like took a picture, and now with ChatGPT can take pictures. My baby had like a bump on his like lymph node, and took a picture, said, hey, here's what's going on, what do you think? And it ended up being exactly what the pediatrician said.
Hmm.
So I'm definitely not suggesting that ChatGPT is going to take away doctors anymore. I'm just saying that it is a pretty good research tool that I think
Exactly.
is being adopted very, very much by younger people to already come to that doctor's visit with some knowledge. Obviously, that doesn't replace medical school, but I think that there is a general generational shift away from just, my doctor. And you know what I think actually drives it is that your parents' generation and my parents' generation, the doctor was kind of gospel to an extent, because that doctor knew them. That doctor probably gave birth to them. That doctor probably knew all
Hmm.
their siblings,
Hmm.
knew their parents, knew, that doctor was their pediatrician, and then and then their family, like, knew everything about them. And when you have that level of context about a person, you can give much, much better care, because you're not,
Hmm.
and first of all, you care about the patient. So you're not just going off textbook, you're going after, but also you're customizing your care given all the context that you know about that
Hmm.
person.
Hmm.
And that relationship has been eroded and changed very, very much. And now you've got just giant systems that own all the primary care, and they just have shifting doctors, and you're just going
Yeah.
in to see somebody, and that person doesn't know you. Um, and so I think that probably had a lot to do with it. I would trust. I do. In fact, my doctor is a friend of mine, and I trust him very, very much. If I
Because he
went to,
knows you. Yeah. Hmm. Hmm.
if I think I need a medication, I'll go to you. If not, I'm not going to like trust what you say. So I think
Hmm.
there's definitely that shift there. Um, yeah.
And so, what do you do in your companies to increase patient engagement? Who are your coordinators dealing with? I don't want to even spend 20 minutes with you on the phone to talk about me.
Right.
Have you been able to find some type of hook? Or...
Yeah. I think that there's different levels to this. So I'll tell you uh, the existing mentality and the existing tools, I suppose, at our disposal. There's some basic things. Obviously, you're following a care plan that's customized to the patient. There's motivational interviewing, figuring out how to ask questions that are going to open up the patient, have them talk about. Um, And so, that's what care coordination is about right now, increasing the engagement. First of all, just start with making sure your care coordinators are awesome, they're friendly, they actually care. Like, if you
Yeah.
start with that kind of person, and then you're already in a different world than just someone who's just doing a job. Hello, hi, I'm calling you from Dr. So-and-so. Okay,
Yeah.
bye. So
Yeah.
and then now you stack some motivational interviewing on there, following a care plan, you're going to get a pretty decent result, right? But I think the real answer, and that's what we're hoping to accomplish with CareCo, is you got to get down to the patient's why. I
Hmm.
think that's really the answer. Like, if you're going to make an investment, you have to understand the ROI. You have to understand the result, right? So if you're going to try to get patients to invest in their in their present reality, which might be uncomfortable, diet, exercise,
Yeah.
medication adherence, things like that, they have to actually appreciate what you're working towards.
Hmm. Hmm.
Right. And so I think the trick is, and I look at my own life, like, what are my motivations for staying healthy and active? And it all comes down to something it comes down to a why. It comes down to something I'm
Yeah.
excited about. If you have nothing to live for, and you have nothing exciting, and you don't care for the outcome, and you're just, I remember one patient just saying, well, I'm okay. I'm just waiting for the Lord to take me. I mean, that's a very
Yeah.
sad,
Yeah.
reality. And it's going to be very difficult to get that person to make an investment in their present,
Yeah.
in their present workday.
Yeah, absolutely. And last question before I let you go. So you've been obviously seeing the pre-pandemic, the pandemic, the post-pandemic. So the rise of telemedicine and what you're doing as well, obviously with your company. Do you see that just increasing? People are happy with that. They like that flexibility. What's your perspective on this idea of being maybe a bit more remote, but at the same time closer as well because you have more touch points?
Yeah. I haven't been following probably the last 6 months or so on the reimbursement side where that's trending. So I
Hmm.
kind of stepped out of that for a little bit. But on the practical level, I definitely think that telehealth should be. I think it obviously increases engagement.
Yeah.
It obviously closes certain care gaps and certain health disparities. Like if somebody just doesn't have a doctor's office near them, it's
Yeah.
I grew up for a couple years in Iowa. The closest hospital is hours away. So I know what that's like. So for rural areas, telehealth is going to be huge. Obviously, still have to fix the bandwidth thing, but now we've got Starlink and we've got different tools at our disposal, and so we live in a bit of a different time. I think there's no question about the fact that it should be a viable option. I don't think we should overcorrect and move too far in the telehealth direction where now that's all you can do. Because
Okay.
at the end of the day, you do want to have kind of a base. You want to have the you want to have a doctor that actually saw you and can feel you and can, like that's an important part of healthcare. And so I don't think we should overcorrect, but I definitely think that it's a positive for
Mhm.
sure.
Thank you so much. So, do you have any parting words, any words of wisdom you want to share with the listeners, with the viewers?
Um, I think that it's a wonderful podcast. I appreciate you having these conversations. I think it's important to get these ideas out, and with the mission of getting more people active and understanding. Every one of your listeners should just start with themselves. Start with your own health. Do your own value-based care. Consider yourself an investment,
Mm.
and do your own care coordination. Call yourself once a month. Make sure that you're sticking to your goals, whether that's diet, exercise, medication adherence. That's usually the best way to make the world a better place, is starting with ourselves.
I love that. Thank you so, so much, Mendel. Really appreciate your time. It was
Pleasure.
really a lot of pearls, and I really appreciate it. Talk to you very soon.
Thank you, Peggy.
Bye.
Bye.